Well, good evening. As Allie said, my name is Tom Lewis. My wife and I and our family have been part of Holy Spirit Parish since 1990. So 30 plus years, 31 years. We've recently moved to Pennsylvania, Kathy and I. You'll hear that name a lot tonight, Kathy, my wife. She and I have been married 42 years. But the social ministry of our mission work is still part of the Holy Spirit Parish. Our mission activity and our mission headquarters and communications, all of the infrastructure for that is here in Memphis. And that brings us back to Memphis quite often, in addition to the 7 children we adopted and raised in this parish. So Holy Spirit, community, and in general, it just has a very special place in our heart. We have offered scholarships in the past and still have active scholarships to where I went to high school in Dallas. We're trying it this year with the youth group at Holy Spirit. If it's something that you're interested in, we'll continue it, and if it's not, no problem. And a couple other places. The main reason I offer that is that if you decide to come, you will not be the only high school student on this trip. You'll meet some students from other areas of the country as well, in addition to the opportunity for traveling over to Africa, which is where this mission opportunity exists. So I'm here tonight to say to you, if there's somebody here that has a burning passion to join us next summer on one of our mission trips, then we will happily welcome you to join us. It will cost you your time and your talent, but it will not cost you any money. It's about a $3,000 expenditure per person when we take one of these trips, with most of that being airfare. But we'll get into a little bit of logistics of housing and food and things like that as we get into the presentation. I've prepared a few slides on a PowerPoint presentation to try to give you some visual image of what I'm talking about. And then I've got a couple of short videos. One was made by a volunteer that went with us 4 years ago. And another video is, who here might know Father Dexter? One. Father Dexter is one of the diocesan priests here who's gone with us in the past. And there's a short video of him at Mass. So let me start with a little bit of the name of our village is Sarabu, and give you kind of, go ahead and change slides, give you kind of the geography of where Sarabu is located. It's in Africa, on the west coast, West Africa they call it, where the kind of the hump of the continent comes out. It's in the, in the green space there, the top slide, and then that's the country itself on the bottom slide. It's about the size of Ohio, so it's not a real big country. And you can see there's a number of smaller countries around it, which we'll discuss a little bit later in the presentation. The town of Sarabu, it's really a village of about 5,000 people, is a couple hundred miles from the capital city of Freetown, which you can see is in the kind of western side of the country, and Sarabu is more east and a little bit south of that. From here, we travel to either Chicago or New York, sometimes Atlanta. From one of those takeoff cities, we go to Europe, usually Brussels, sometimes London. It just depends on the schedule and the cost of the tickets, wherever I can get the best deal. And then from Europe, we'll fly to Freetown. From Freetown, then we'll drive from the city of Freetown to, you see the town nearest us, Bow, That's actually the second largest town in Sierra Leone, second in size only to Freetown. From Freetown to Bo takes about 4 hours, and from Bo to Sarabu takes about 2 hours. The roads are really bad now between Bo and Sarabu, so you can't go very fast. It's all dirt roads. It used to be all dirt roads from Freetown. It would take us 15 hours to get to Sarabu. So it's improved considerably since when we opened the clinic some years ago. So that's the geography of what's being proposed to you to consider going to. Has anybody here been to Africa? Beautiful continent. Okay, Brian, let's just do the next slide, please. Now, by way of history of how did this come about, that's a picture of Kathy on our first mission trip in 1988. So this is our 33rd year of being involved in mission work, which is exactly half my life, half Kathy's life. 1961 is where the story begins with Kathy. She was in the 3rd grade, and a priest from a Marino priest came to her school and spoke about his work as a missionary in Africa. And she was so taken by his presentation that she decided that's what she wanted to do when she was old enough to do what she wanted to do. Now, for a 3rd grader to consciously think about entering into the sufferings of other people, I think is a very special call. And I've had the blessing of witnessing my wife demonstrate lots of special callings in the process of our mission work. A lot of lives have been affected in very wonderful ways because of that Marino priest trekking to her school in a little town outside of Galveston, Texas, to talk about his work. When she was a junior in high school, she won a science contest, which the first place prize was spending the summer between her junior and senior year with one of the famous heart programs in the Texas Medical Center in Houston. There was a fairly famous fellow named DeVakey who was doing heart transplants and beginning to invent some of the first procedures for open heart surgery. She spent a summer with him, and that sort of was the medical side of the mustard seeds, if you will. Kathy finished all of her training. She's an ophthalmologist, and so our mission from a medical standpoint is eye care. She finished all of her training, and by 1986 and by 1988 we were on our first mission. And it took her those 2 years just to prepare for our first mission. We were totally clueless what we were doing in those days. We're just sort of clueless what we're doing these days. We've learned a little bit. In 1988, I mentioned that we made our first trek. That picture is taken in Nigeria. And Nigeria was the first of several countries in the continent of Africa that we would visit through a networking process among missionary groups. And we would be the I-team as part of a larger group that might go to Africa. And it was organized by the Methodist Church in the early days of our mission work. In 2005, we had already been going to Sierra Leone through one of these networking relationships since the year 2000. And we befriended the Catholic Archbishop, and he asked us in 2005 if we would consider leaving Freetown, where we are working in a Methodist hospital, and going out into the bush and building an eye clinic, because the opportunity for healthcare out in the bush is limited at best. In this country of 7 million people, there's only one ophthalmologist, and that one ophthalmologist works, lives, and does her work in Freetown. She's also the National Medical Director of iCare, I guess by default, since there's nobody else that could take that position. So you can see that in 2005, we made the decision to go out to the bush. I was there for several months as we were completing the completion of our clinic. It's a joint effort with the Catholic Church. They provide a place for us to work, and we provide everything else. The equipment, hiring of employees, all the purchase of supplies and medicines, glasses, etc. Anything you can think of that you might need to run an eye clinic, that was our joint effort with the Catholic Church. It's a very poor country. When we arrived there in 2000, they had just completed a 10-year civil war. And the good news is the war ended, and the bad news is that the country was in total shambles. At that time, it was the poorest country in the world. It's doing better now, but it's still a very poor country. Next slide. Demographically, the village itself is half Christian and half Muslim. Now, the country of Sierra Leone is about 95% Muslim. Around the year 1900, some Catholic priests from Ireland traveled to Sierra Leone as missionaries to establish the Catholic Church in Sierra Leone. They got off their boat in Freetown, and one of their early trips was to the local prison, where the chief of Sarabu was in prison. In those days, what's now known as Sierra Leone, was a colonial country ruled and supervised by England. So the British had arrested the chief because he was encouraging his villagers not to pay their taxes to the Brits. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Apparently he was a fairly gregarious sort of fellow, and the priests were rather taken by him when they're meeting. So much so that he invited them, if he ever got out of jail, to go with him to his village of Sarabu to establish their church. And that's exactly what happened. So as a result, this parish was founded in the early 1900s and has been around ever since. And the village of 5,000, like I said, it's about half Christian, half Catholic. Half Muslim. They love each other. They grow up together. They go to school together. They marry each other. There's no tension, oh, you're Muslim and I'm a Christian and we're supposed to be enemies. There's none of that. This village could teach the world how to live together in peace. Excellent. Oh, well, let me just comment on the pictures for a second. Can we go back here? Of course, the Catholic Church you recognize. What you'll probably not recognize is not just the mosque, but a woman sitting among the men in the mosque. And that's, again, my Kathy. And you'll be part of this if you come with us. They bring us into them, ask us to come join them in the mosque, and they pray over us, that God will continue to watch over us and help us. And it's a very special time when we're there. On numerous trips, we've had priests go with us from this diocese. I mentioned Father Dexter, Father Bradshaw, you might know or know the name, over at St. Michael. He's been with us a couple of times. Father Bruce Neely was at St. Patrick's before he was transferred to Austin. Father Greg Salado has been with us. And that's just a priest from this diocese. There's been other priests from other parts of the country who've gone with us. But they particularly enjoy going to the mosque because while they don't believe Jesus is God, they do have great respect for Jesus, and they do have great respect for his mother, Mary. And they always ask the Catholic priests if they will speak to them in the mosque. Father David Knight, who recently passed down in Guatemala, I guess he still holds the record for our oldest missionary at 84 years old. After he gave his talk in the mosque, and he had lots of questions about what he was speaking on, and then followed up just one-on-one with him in the mosque. He was there for about an hour after we broke up. And he came out of the mosque saying to me, I never met so many people who did not know they were Christians. And he says that in the spirit of St. Cardinal Newman, who says that anybody that exercises their conscience to make a good decision that's good for people, that they are exercising in the light of Christ. So they may not know that they're exercising in the light of Christ, but that's very much the root of our Catholic faith doctrine that says everyone that God created can go to heaven. That's fine to change it, but just to finish that slide where Kathy's sitting, there was a very upset man in the mosque that a woman was sitting with the men that day. He had come to Sarabu to get his eye surgery from Freetown, and he stood up and complained about that. And the chief imam there, which is sort of the high priest of the mosque, told him to go back to Freetown. They did not. It's not tolerated anywhere that I know of to have women and men mixing in the mosque, but they make one exception for Kathy. Well, I would describe to you the village using words like tranquil or festive, spiritual. We do feel a special presence of God in this village, and I can't measure it. It's something that you kind of sense. Now, they're incredibly poor. They don't know where the next meal is coming from, but they do, like any reason to party, they will have a long one. And there's all kinds of local traditions, dances, etc., that you'll be exposed to when you come. I would just simply say that it's fun. They're a very docile kind of people. That actually was a disadvantage to them when the Civil War rolled around. That was exported from another country in the 90s. But it's a wonderful sort of trait. If you're living among them for a short period of time and would like to try to get to know a culture, they're very approachable, very loving, very outgoing sort of folks in a nice kind of tranquil way. And on the spiritual side, when I first went to Nigeria, which was another third world, very poor area of the world, I sort of equated wealth and happiness together. And I learned very early on that there is no relationship between wealth and happiness. In fact, it might be the opposite. The wealthier you are, it may be more difficult to be happy. These people are happy. They don't know where they're going to eat, but they're happy, joyful, and very prayerful. Very strong faith, humbling, strong faith. And it's been a tremendous blessing for Kathy and I to be around people who have such strong faith despite being in such dire situations. You can see the living standards. Thatched hut, houses are very common. If they're a little more, if they have a little bit of money, they'll take a bag of cement and make a very thin paste out of it and cover an entire house with it. Just a real thin layer of concrete paste on top of the mud blocks that you see there mixed with the sticks. So you're considered a little wealthier if you're able to have this glaze on your mud blocks. Spiritual, we're standing in front of a church near Sarabu, but there, whether it's the mosque or the Catholic Church, a lot of praying going on. We begin each day at 6:15 at Mass in the Catholic Church, and we hear the Muslims next door praying as well. Thank you, Brian. Oh, didn't introduce my friend Brian Watson. Brian is from St. Anne's Bartlett Parish and has been helping us on our mission program for some time. He also happens to be more technically gifted when it comes to putting things on websites. So I asked him to please do this for us tonight. Well, this is a small part of the village. this is an intersection of, you see Main Street on the bottom, and there's another side street going up from the mosque. But starting at the top left is Sacred Heart Catholic Church. And this whole map is Catholic property. Then in the middle blue block, you see Southern Eye Clinic. That's what we started with to do eye care. And on the bottom right is the Central Mosque. And then across the street from that campus is a football field, which is also an important part of our life these days. You see a green pathway connecting the church, the clinic, and the mosque. We're developing that pathway as a pathway of unity. This being the year of St. Joseph, we're dedicating it to St. Joseph, tying the Muslims and the Catholics together literally, as they already are spiritually. Well, we started out in eye care. We do two things now. We still do eye care, and we do it in a rather wonderful way. But we also have a lot of community development activities. When we first arrived in 2005, we had been about eyes, since we started in 1988. We would go to this community or that community with this mission team. We're the eye team. That's what we do. We do eyes. And we work in existing facilities, however good or bad they may be, whatever technology they might have. And usually it was fairly primitive. But we were eyes. We now are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the clinic. That's open year-round. And we couldn't help but notice that in this community we're becoming citizens of, they've got some other problems. Eye care may not be the most important thing we could be doing. And so, just out of concern and compassion, we started trying to develop other ways of supporting now our new home. Now we always know where we're going. There's no wondering, where's the mission team going next year? We know where we're going. We're going to Sarabu. And so that whole citizen component of our relationship with Sarabu is totally different from any other place that we've worked since 1988. On the eye care side, exams, surgery, medicines, glasses, whatever the ailments might be, if we can take care of it, we can't always take care of it, but if we can, and we can most of the time, they get great care. They get the same eye surgery, for instance, for cataract surgery in that village that anybody would get here in the United States. Kathy does the same eye surgery. Now, when Archbishop Ganda asked us to build this eye clinic, and Kathy turned to me and said, well, Tom, I'm up for it, but unlike what we've experienced in all these other communities in Africa, where their equipment is poor and outdated, no new technology at all, where she's doing surgery wearing glasses, magnifying glasses, that she was not willing to develop an eye clinic that did not have the same standard of care there that she had in Memphis. She was not willing to be responsible for a program that she herself would not be willing to have surgery there on herself. So that was the standard. So, modern eye surgery. Sarabu is one of the few places, not just in Sierra Leone, the only place in Sierra Leone, but one of the few places in the whole western side of Africa where you can get modern eye surgery as a result of her commitment and her requirement. We see over 15,000 patients a year. We do upwards of, we may hit 1,000 surgeries this year. It's our biggest surgical year. We've got 10 outreach clinics where we're going out to neighboring villages that have the travel is so difficult. Some places it's easier for us to go to them than them come to us. Our clinic accounts for about 80% of the eye surgery that's done in Sierra Leone, which is, on the surface, sounds like a kind of a cool statistic, but it's really a terrible statistic. That just means there's no other supply other than the one ophthalmologist in Freetown, and half her time is spent in administrative kinds of work. And when she does surgery, she's got to charge for it. So that eliminates a big part of the population. 90% of the eye surgery that Kathy does is cataract surgery. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But there are other things that do wander in, and it's things that, frankly, we don't see in this country. And then we started out drawing patients from the village, and then word got out, and we started seeing patients from around the country. Now there's 7 countries that routinely send patients can travel from, to come to this small remote village in Sierra Leone for their eye surgery. Next slide. There is lots of pathology. These are things that we cannot take care of. These patients, well, the lower left, we were able to excise that growth. We don't know what kind of a tumor it was. But the top left, the child that has the huge eye tumor. The top right, similar. Bottom right, where a native healer encouraged the grandmother to put tree bark in the boy's eyes to cure the infection. And his corneas are so decompensated in this picture. He's blind. He just lost his eyesight completely. And we don't have, even in this country, we don't really have anything to help here. It's so far gone. If it was early stage, well, maybe. Now the growth in the lady here, Kathy was able to remove it, stitch it, and actually it turned out quite well. We don't know what the growth was, how it originated. And it wasn't directly on the eye, thank goodness, but it was close enough to the eye that we were surprised that it did not damage the eye. It was so big. This is a photo where Kathy had pushed it down a bit and held the camera up a bit, but it was blocking the lady's vision quite a bit. She wore a cloth over her face so that she could only see with one eye because of the cosmetic disfigurement that it was causing. Next slide. Then on the community development, and I put the word responsible in there because it's easy for us to think, well, we're from America, we know what's best. And that's not true. That is not true. It may look like this is a good idea, but unless you really work with the leadership of your community, rightly or wrongly, they're the leaders, and they know what's best for their community. So we haven't done anything that the leadership of Sarabu has not said, we approve, we're on board, or it may have been their idea. St. Louis Catholic Church and Holy Spirit Parish have created all kinds of food donation exercises where they're packaging food on a Saturday afternoon, and we add a lot of rice and other nutriments to it, but we ship it over there on one of our containers, and we're currently serving over 200,000 meals a year in this small little village of 5,000. Certainly all patients that come and their families that come with them, they have no money, they have no means of feeding themselves, we feed them. There's no hotels. I mean, housing is arranged with people that are living in the village, and we help feed some of those people as well. There's some very tough situations in the village where they just simply can't get out to even get food. We provide food for them, and then the pecking order in their culture of who gets fed, starting with the men through the women into the children, and you can imagine the youngest child be the last on the feeding totem pole. So we feed the kids in kindergarten also. And as we can get more food, we'll feed more people. But that's kind of where it sits right now. We've got a team of volunteers that help arrange people where they're going to sleep, cook, feed. It's really quite an amazing effort by the Christians and the Muslims in this little village to welcome people, particularly when Kathy and I are there. Now during the year, when the clinic is still open and still providing services, they don't get the big crowds that we get when the American Eye Doctor arrives. So it is a big difference, and it's in those peak times that we really need the food and all the volunteers. And then it's all about cooking and eating. Top right, there's no such thing as an indoor kitchen in the village. Everything's cooked outside on an open fire. And they take the boxes of food that come from Memphis and they pour it all into these big, incredible pots. They're cooking for quite a while, but it's quite good. And well, I get to participate sometimes in feeding some of the kids. It's fun, but it's serious business when the ladies are bringing their cooked food out to start feeding. It's a rice-based diet, and rice is the #1 food product that's consumed in Sierra Leone and in a lot of third world countries because it's abundant and it's fairly inexpensive. But within the village areas, pineapples, avocados, bananas, grapefruit grow, and are wonderful. So their diet consists primarily of rice, some local vegetables, mostly potatoes and leafy kinds of things like spinach that they can eat and consume, and the fruits. And they'll take the vegetables and they'll boil the leaves and cook the potatoes or the cassava, as it's called. It's like a yam, if you will. And they'll add a little bit of fish or a little bit of chicken, or a little bit of goat meat to it. By the way, goat is the largest animal in Sierra Leone. There's no lions and tigers. That's all on the east side of Africa or south. And they'll make it into sort of a sauce or a soup or a stew, and they'll have a big plate of rice and they'll pour the stew on top of it. And that's sort of the meal for, doesn't matter breakfast, lunch, or dinner. That's the meal. Whenever they get a chance to eat, that's what they're consuming. Next slide, please. So responsible community development. Well, what do they need? Food, water, education. Water. When we arrived in 2005, you could wash your clothes, take a bath, watch the animals wander through and defecate, clean yourself up after defecating, and oh, by the way, how about a glass of water? That was their drinking water, and had been for over 100 years. That was it. Little creek, until it dried up. And there's kind of two weather seasons in Sierra Leone. There's the wet time of the year and the dry time of the year. And during the dry seasons, they both last about 6 months, where you either have rain almost every day or no rain at all. About month number 4 in the dry season, this little creek dries up and the canals are right. So you get a bucket, you put it on your head filled with water, and you start walking. And typically it's the kids that are doing most of the walking, kids and women. And men are out in the fields working. So we've been able to develop some water wells that go down to the aquifer. And it's good, clean water. And it's probably the most life-giving development we've had in the village since we've been there. Now, do a mental count in your house of how many water outlets you have in your house. Let's start with the inside of the house. How many bathtubs? How many sinks? How many toilets? Wherever there's a source of water, maybe a washing machine, hot water heater. Now to the outside, how many water faucets are in the backyard, the front yard, along the fence, or on the house, by the driveway? What kind of a number comes to mind? How many water outlets at your house?
11.
11? How many at your house?
Probably like 16 or 17.
How many are at your house?
16.
We have 9 water wells for 5,000 people. And they are so happy to have the water. Now, you can imagine these water wells are pretty busy. But they're no longer getting it, as they traditionally have. And all of a sudden, the health of the village really improved. There were so many times when Kathy, as the only doctor in the village, You know, they would be bringing some dehydrated baby to her to ask, well, what do we do? We don't have IVs. We certainly don't have, you know, any sort of medicines, you know, for babies that have waterborne diseases and things. And from that standpoint, we still are eyes. And they would die. They would just die. And most all of that's now history, no longer happening. So, long story about how the war wells came to be, but just another act of God inspiring one of the volunteers who's been over there to say, these people need water. Let's see what we can do about it. And a year later, raised about $100,000. Again, with the guidance of the elders, they had 9 water wells spread out in kind of 9 zones of the village as they designed it. Education is a biggie as well. The classrooms are pitiful. There are rooms, and there might be enough chairs for this, albeit broken down chairs for the students to sit. But that's it. There's certainly no books. Oh, there might be a board, not necessarily a chalkboard, but a board on the wall that they can take some chalk and the teacher can write things. And they have little notepads that they'll write the notes from the chalkboard and try to learn as much as they can. The literacy rate for students graduating from the 8th grade is right at about 50%. So their education obviously is not very effective. It's very challenging. So we decided to try to help that out. We've done several things. We built a computer center. That's 2 of our containers welded together. We opened them up, welded them together, and we have a 20-station computer center. We don't have internet, but there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of software that can teach you things. So every grade, there's a kindergarten, there's a boys' primary school, a girls' primary school, there's a Muslim school, but a lot of the Muslims go to the other schools as well. And then there's a secondary school, so there's 5 schools, and all of them rotate all of their classes through the computer center during the week. We also had a difficult time just having teachers because we're out in the bush. The government pays all the teachers in the whole country the same salary structure. So if you want extra income, you've got to take on another job, which is, you know, pretty common, pretty reasonable. But to get another job, your best shot is if you're in one of the big cities. And so we pay a stipend to there's 30 teachers there in the village between the 5 schools. Yeah, 30 assistants. And in any event, we pay all the teachers and all the assistant teachers a stipend, like having an extra job. So they get what the government pays, and they get what we pay. And the combination of the two fairly mirrors what they could accomplish on their own in a big city, having a part-time job. We give out scholarships. We're closing in on our number 2,000 school scholarship students. And from kindergarten, we now have a student in their 3rd year of medical school. So through grade school, high school, college, even into medical school. And we've had some of the college students, when they graduate from college, there's some of the teachers now in the village as well. So that's really been going quite well. About half the students were going to school at all when we arrived there in 2005. And our goal was to get 100%, and we're very close to having 100% of all the kids in the village in school. The Bumpy Cup, and I put the other community development activities is opportunities to bring joy to the village. And sports it's rightly or wrongly, sports are amazingly powerful. Soccer, they call football, volleyball, intramural sports. We do all those things at different times of the year. The Bumpy Cup has now become one of the biggest tournaments, not just in our district, but in the country. Because we pay about $200 in their currency. It's 2 million millions. Okay? So they're millionaires playing football. And in the big city of Bow that you saw earlier, that the city tournament there pays half that. And so the radio station, it's based in Bow, it's a national radio, learned about our tournament. There's 10 kind of regional villages around Sarabu, including Sarabu, where these 10 teams come from that participate in the Bumpy Cup each year. And the district is named Bompe, thus the name Bompe Cup. What is this Bumpy Cup stuff out in the bush, paying twice what our great tournament in Bow pays? So they came and investigated this about 5 years ago, and they just fell in love with it, to see these guys out in the bush play so hard, typically barefoot. They were tying T-shirts and socks together to have a soccer ball when we first started. So the tournament has come and evolved. The first tournament was in 2009, and it's just become bigger and bigger and bigger. They now broadcast the championship game of the Bumpy Cup nationally each year. They send 2 of their announcers to the tournament, and they have a good time with it. And I've gotten where I sit next to them, and it occurs each June, by the way. So you'll see the Bumpy Cup championship, the tournament games are played out in the bush in the other villages, and then they come to Sarabu for the championship game. But it's really quite entertaining to listen to them as they talk about being at Sarabu Stadium, where thousands of people are pouring in for the championship game, and it's just a field, the villagers aren't coming and standing around. It's quite entertaining. One of our volunteers handing out the Bumpy Cup trophy. No, that's fine. In January we have intramurals where the village divides up into 4 teams: red, yellow, blue, and green, and they compete against each other. And so we give out school scholarships. We give out some money. It's typically the first Sunday after New Year's, and again, it's a big day in the life of the village. Next. Then we sponsor a lot of cultural events. We've had dance competitions, we've had cooking competitions, we've had happy hours. The cooking competition featured 10 cooks once a month competing against each other, and the villagers eating their food and deciding who was the best of those 10, and doing that for 10 months, and then taking the 10 winners, and then they compete to learn who is the best cook. A lot of fun. Again, just bringing joy to the community in any way that we can. Next slide, please. Well, so what might you all do as volunteers if you're part of the team? And we've had anywhere from 0 to 13 volunteers with us at a time. Well, first and foremost, a few years ago we built Caritas House, which is top left. So, unlike prior volunteer teams before then, you will have a nice bed to sleep in. You will have a toilet to use. You will not have to go out in the bush to use the bathroom. And you will have a shower. It's pretty cush living for the living conditions of everybody else in the village. To have a flush toilet and it's cold, but nonetheless a refreshing shower. So just from a standard of living standpoint, you're roughing it for American standards, but you're in luxury for African standards, or at least for Sarabu standards. The number one ministry of anybody that comes is the ministry of being present. It's not what skills do you have, what can I do, gee, I can't take care of eyes, what can I do? Well, the whole village is available to you. Yes, you'll work in the medical clinic. We'll rotate you through the various positions. But if you want to spend more time in one of the schools, or the computer center, or you want to be involved in sports activities or cultural activities that are going on, whatever suits you would be the best way I could describe it. And I say faith-based because we do start each day with prayer, Mass. And we do pray before all the meals, and we do go to the mosque and get prayed over. And so it's very much an exercise of the Gospel of St. Matthew. Whatever you do for the least of mine, you're doing for me. You can see volunteers helping on in surgery, carrying patients, escorting patients around. This patient's just coming out of surgery. there's so many things, reading books, arts and crafts, so many things that can be done with the kids. And they'll mob you, and they'll love you. So I would just suggest to you that if you're sitting there going, well, I don't really have any skills that I can offer. Wrong. Showing up. They love, particularly from the youth of America, they love talking to you. Love hearing, what are your dreams? What are you thinking about? What are you wanting to do? And it helps them dream outside the boundaries of Sarabu, what's going on in the world, and they let that wash over their thoughts, and somehow or another it affects them too. And it's not uncommon for our volunteers to have long-term ongoing communications, especially now in this age of social media. While there's no internet in Sarabu, you know, the cell phone towers and things, cell phones are really funny in this community in Sierra Leone. It doesn't cost you anything to receive a phone call. You got to pay for it when you make a phone call. So a lot of people have phones, but they're not calling anybody. They're just hoping somebody will call them because they don't have any money to use it otherwise. Go ahead. Next slide. The process forward, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. If you're, I brought some letters of interest that I will leave, and I ask that if you're interested, that you complete the letter of interest and get it back by the 17th of October. So you've got about a month to discern it, pray on it, talk to your parents about it. We're finally able to have a going away party. I mentioned we moved to Pennsylvania. Because of our mission work and our kids and grandkids, we come back to Memphis a lot. And so our participation in Holy Spirit still is alive and well. But we're going to have COVID didn't allow us back in December to have a going away party. So in hopes it won't get canceled again. But assuming it goes forward, in this very room on Friday evening, October the 29th, we're having a going away party for all of our friends here at Holy Spirit and in Memphis. Some folks from St. Louis will be coming over to feed my flock. Their food campaign is the next day. But we'd like to announce who's going with us if anybody opts to join us. So that's why the dates are as they are. We may have a second announcement as well. We'll see. Father Dexter, I mentioned, is going with us. He's offering a scholarship to one of his classes over at St. Benedict. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But we probably won't know the outcome of that one, but now that I think about it. But between then, the 29th of October, and when we leave in June, and we don't have firm dates yet, but think in terms of at least 3 weeks you'd be gone during the month of June, and maybe 4. There's passports to be had, visas to be made, shots to be had. The only mandatory shot is for yellow fever. But if you're not current on your other shots, you're going to get those up to date as well. And then the travel itself. Main requirement is that you come back and tell this group about your experience. So next year's youth group can prepare next fall the same way as you're preparing, but with one of you among you able to say, here's what it was for me. I've got a couple of short videos I'd like to play for you. The first one was made by one of our volunteers 4 years ago. And the second video is Father Dexter in our church, where Mass takes approximately 3 hours. You can imagine that. We only have one Mass.
It's got a swim to your thumb drive.
Oh, I'll show you. I might suggest. Click on Hi. Thank you all for your patience and your attention. How are we doing on time? 7:15, we okay? I don't know about volume, go as loud as you can.
Back to the room in the mountain sky with fire.
see the scenes are from the City of the Boat. We saw the motor scooters and cycles.
This one's a little quicker.
Yeah, a minute and a half by the lecture. This is just one of several processions that takes place. Wasn't that great spraying the holy water? Very efficient. Very efficient. They don't waste water in any way over there.
Corona special.
That's right. But what they were bringing up in addition to the host and the wine was what the priest would be living on the next week. The diocese there does not have enough money to pay its priest, and they leave it up to each church community to provide food and whatever else it takes to accommodate and take care of the priest. As a result, Kath and I, we donate to the church and to the mosque to help the chief imam and help the pastor survive a little bit. I mean, our hearts, just go out to them. So what can I say? They're our family. We love them, and I invite you to consider being part of the family. And let me just stop and see what, if any, questions there might be for this opportunity. Yes.
What languages do they speak? Like, I see they have English, obviously, on Hunter Book there, but do they have any other?
Yes, because it was an English colony, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
English actually is their national language. The country itself is divided into kind of 14 districts. We're in Bumpy District. Each district pretty much centralizes on a particular tribe that historically lived in that area. The tribe that lived in our area of Sarabu was known as the Mende tribe. So the Mende language is alive and well in that area of Sierra Leone, like the other tribal languages are in the other areas. And particularly the folks that do not have much education, they'll either speak exclusively Mende, or they'll take Mende and English and kind of combine it into a local Creole language. But for anybody that's been to school, and probably 80% of the village speaks really quite good English. Different accent. You've got to listen carefully at first. You'll catch on, but they don't say the words necessarily the same way we say them. But in theory, we're speaking English to each other, and they've got the same thing with us. They've got to listen to us real close. And how you say things makes such a difference. I never forget the first day we were there. Lots of people were showing up, and we were just trying to get people registered. I was outside. Okay, now if y'all would just form a line right here, we'll, first come, first serve. We'll start registering. Everybody just kept standing there. So somebody told me if I'd use the word queue, they would understand. If you form a queue, I said, and all of a sudden everybody, one nice long line that stretched way around down the street. As I managed, our managers, I used to say things like, "What do you think?" We'd be talking some issue, but what do you think? Which to me was kind of a common way of asking, "What do you think?" And they always responded, "About what?" About what we're talking about. Oh. So I learned that if I'd say, "How do you see it?" they know exactly what I'm asking. So small things that you'll pick up. But you'll learn a few Mende words. and some of the Creole language is because they'll insist that you learn it because they're going to ask you so many times to try to say it, and they like to laugh when you say it with your American accents. I keep them laughing quite a bit in my attempts to say things. Other questions? Yes?
Is there any other way to contribute other than going on the trip, like donations or something?
Yes, certainly. We have a base of about 300 donors that contribute regularly to support our mission activities. And that covers roughly half of the operating costs, and then Kathy and I are paying the other half. We're in the middle of a quiet period of an endowment campaign that's raising funds so that we hope 5 years from now will be sufficient to make it self-sustaining, whether Kathy's continuing to work or not. And we, from time to time, have project work where we're doing mailings and we just need help stuffing envelopes and things like that. So if you would like to take a letter of interest and say, I don't know about the trip, but I'd happily volunteer for things here in the Memphis area, that'd be great. I do have a newsletter I'm going to hand out there, everybody. In fact, would you mind handing me my bag? Let's do that while we're talking. Which covers a lot of what we covered tonight in a more abbreviated format. This newsletter went out last month, so it's fairly recent. We produce a couple of them a year. And I guess, oh, thanks, Brian.
Yep.
And then other questions? Yes?
What type of season is it when you get there?
It's usually dry. You saw the wet roads, so sometimes it's kind of at the beginning of the wet season. But normally, from about November through June, it's fairly dry. But the flip from the transition's not it's not on a clock or anything. Sometimes it comes in early, and when it does, you can see how the potholes fill up with water, and it really makes traveling difficult. Let's see, Brian. Would you also pass out the? There's letters.
Is it another spot? You want to give them a hint of that path that we're going to be doing later in the year, or not time yet?
A hint of what now?
The path that what's going to go on the path?
Yeah, we're building that walkway between the church and the clinic and the mosque. We're making out of memorial bricks, so people that are donating this year into the endowment campaign will have a memorial brick in their name, however they want to design it. And then starting in November, we're actually going to be selling some bricks as one of the ways we're raising money. But we never have too much money, by the way. Just thank you for asking that.
So where do we turn this in?
Give it to Alec by the 17th, and then she and I will be in communication with it. There's a place for your parents to sign off on. I'm going to come spend time with you and your family to really get everybody comfortable with this. So, if you decide this is something you want to do and your name is chosen to go, then I'm definitely going to be coming back and meeting with your folks, your brothers and sisters, whoever, grandparents, whoever might be interested in knowing more about this. Because it does make some people nervous. We took a graduate from Notre Dame who grew up with our children a few years ago, and her parents said, "Oh, Claire, you've done such a great job in school. We're so proud of you. You graduated from Notre Dame with honors. You've got this great job waiting for you after you finish. We'd like to give you a trip anywhere in the world." And they were thinking, let's go to London or Paris, maybe New York, I don't know where they might go. And she said, before they had a chance to explain it all, she says, "I want to go to Africa with Tom and Kathy." And they went, "Oh no!" They were scared to death, and I get that. But we spent a lot of time with them. Claire had a great experience. She came back and enrolled in medical school and is now a emergency physician that goes on lots of mission trips. Who knows? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So how are you selected to be going on this trip? Is it like a drawing, or is it like
that are really interested in it.
Yeah. You'll see on the letter of interest that you'll have an opportunity to kind of express yourself as to why you might be interested. So on the bottom of the sheet, continuing on the back as much as you want, share with me as best you can your thoughts and your ideas. Some of you may have some experience with mission work. Include that if you want. But there's no rules for what you need to say or not say. What Kathy and I are going to try to do, we've got, we're going to circulate it by email to our buddies back in Sierra Leone, so they're going to be reading your letters too, and they're going to help us try to discern what might be the best match of somebody to come with us. And I can't begin to explain to you why some of the decisions they've made in the past. We have no, if you're in part of this group, that's the only qualification we've asked for. Then it's a matter of you and your parents coming to an arrangement that they're okay with it and you're okay with it. And then we get people from Sierra Leone to review those letters and say, okay, because they haven't had the benefit of even meeting you. They're meeting you through your writing. So whatever you want to convey to somebody that you've not met, you'll meet them when you get there. But keep that in mind, whatever's in your heart. And they're going to do their best to discern based on that. They'll read them and pray on them. They'll say, okay, George is the pick. I said, okay, George, you're in. And I'll call George, or Allie will call George, somebody will call George and say, you want it. It's yours for the taking. And if they say yes, great. If not, then we'll go to the next bit. So that's the process.
You had mentioned earlier, Kathy was the only woman in the mosque that time.
Yes.
Is she the only ophthalmologist that is there?
For the first 10 years, that was correct. She was the only ophthalmologist that was doing eye surgery. Now, she has since trained our clinic manager to do cataract surgery. In that country, they do have cataract technicians, but they still do surgery that was modern in the States 50 years ago. Manual, very, very challenging surgery from a post-operative standpoint, lots of infections, etc. So, a modern small incision surgery, he now knows how, and he might be one of the best of that particular procedure around. He's certainly done more than Kathy now has done, because he's there doing surgery every week. We also have now surgeons from Wills Eye Hospital out of Philadelphia, University of Colorado, Department of Ophthalmology, and Emory is with us. So typically there's 2 or 3 surgeons every time we go. And we were just at Wills Eye Friday and yesterday morning, and we met the surgeon from the program that's going to be joining us in January. So it's expanding, and the medical student, I mentioned a third-year medical student, he's planning on being our future ophthalmologist, native ophthalmologist, our first native ophthalmologist that will be based there in Sorado. Wills Eye wants to ultimately set up a training program. So there's a lot of great stuff going on, that we'll witness some of it, but the future leadership and the future human resources of the mission are alive and well. And the young surgeons are beginning to come in. They've all adopted Kathy as their mom, and it's really sweet. It's been such a great experience for them too. Yes?
How has COVID affected your travels and volunteer opportunities in the community? Did they experience any of that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we'll have to do a final, can we still come check, long about the middle of May. And if the health authorities, and we'll do that through the National Eye Director, if they say, well, all things considered, we'd rather you not come, then it'll be canceled. And we were not able to go this year at all because of COVID. We went last year, but not this year. We're not able to. And so a few years ago, the Ebola virus was a big reason why we couldn't go on one of the trips. So it does happen, but it's truly the exception and not the rule. But we'll stay in touch with the authorities. They know what's going on in their country better than anyone. And the main reason why we couldn't go wasn't because they're worried about us catching the virus or even bringing it in. We're vaccinated. Whether that's helpful or not, we hope it's helpful. Their concern was that the crowds that come when we come, there's no way we can social distance. There's no way, even most people don't have masks, which is so cool. I mean, we can give out all we can, but it would just be that village almost doubles in size when we were there. So.
Has COVID hit that village pretty hard recently? Has COVID hit the village?
They're not aware of actually having any cases of COVID in the village. Now, would they know if they had it? I don't know. Because malaria is such a prominent disease there. We take malaria medicine, before we go and while we're there, and for a little while after we come back. So we've never had a case of malaria among the volunteers, except for one high school student who stopped taking their medicine when they got back to America, came down with a mild case of malaria. That's the only, and it masks itself very similar. So, but no one's died. Typically they don't die from malaria, they just don't feel really darn. Thank y'all for your attention. Is there anything else that I can do for y'all besides get out of the way?
Any final questions?
How long will we be on this mission trip? Like from leaving here to leaving there?
Yeah, we will depart. Day one is typically a Thursday. So I looked at the calendar. I think June 2nd is the first Thursday of June. June 9th, the second Thursday. The schools in Dallas that send the scholarship with us, those students won't be available until June 9th. So that's probably the departure date, but I'm not positive. We will get to Europe by the morning of the 10th, so Friday morning, and we'll hop on a plane that afternoon and get to Freetown by that evening, about 8 or 9 hours later. Sometime in the middle of the night, we'll spend the night at a hotel near the airport, and then the next morning we'll begin our trek to Sarabia. We'll probably stop and see the bishop and Beau for the diocese. Be in Sarabia by late afternoon, early evening on Saturday. We'll wake up Sunday, go to Mass at around 9 o'clock, and I'll be introducing you and the other volunteers to the packed house in the church, and they'll be screaming and hollering and wanting to have some more parties or whatever's on their mind. And then by noon we'll be eating. We have a great cook, by the way. You're going to love Benton. She's a really good cook. So we'll be having one of her wonderful meals. And by about 1 o'clock, the son of the imam from the mosque will be taking you on a tour of the village. While Kathy and the other doctors are checking out all the medical supplies and equipment and getting ready for the next day's clinic and surgery. And then we'll begin in earnest with our activities then Monday morning. We'll be in the village for at least 2 weeks, but probably 3 weeks, which means around the 30th of June we'll be getting home. So you'll be gone certainly 3.5 weeks on this trip. And it will change your life. Hopefully in a good way, but it's one of those experiences that it just will be with you the rest of your life. I can say that firsthand. But the feedback I get from other volunteers certainly confirms that. Well, good luck on praying for it, discerning it, and thank you again for your time tonight.
Thank you.
We're a little bit biased. I think it's a great thing to do, but voluntarily entering into a suffering situation, and you'll see tremendous, heartfelt things. You'll see lots of tragedy. You'll see incredible poverty. You'll see lots of suffering, and you'll have to process it. You'll have to process it. But you'll also see incredible joy and strong faith. And without trying to bias the outcome of your visit too much, at least for Kathy and I, it's always been one of those situations where we come home physically exhausted and spiritually on fire. We've just gotten so much more out of it than what we've given. incredible people that have to survive their lifestyle day in and day out and still find room in their heart to love, have happiness, and take the risk of bearing more children. All the, day in and day out, mankind decisions that are made. There's nothing less than miraculous to Kathy and I, who've been blessed with so much all of our life, growing up in middle-class families, mom and dads that we're not worried about tonight's meal, they're worried about maybe next month's tuition or something, but just, there's no way the same, no way the same. We don't leave water running when we're brushing our teeth anymore. Wet the toothbrush and turn it off because we know our friends in Saragu don't have running water in their house. I'm glad they got a well, but that's still hard work. It's just little things like that that you think about, well, what do I have? And what have I taken for granted? Because it will strip all that away from you. The material world really becomes a bunch of stuff. Maybe nice stuff, maybe comfortable stuff, maybe stuff for a few moments gives you a buzz and makes you happy. And you plan for it, and you're kind of glad you're getting a new car, and all those kind of wonderful things that I'm not suggesting anything wrong with. But you'll keep it in perspective. Probably. Anyway, good luck to you, and I'll be following up with Alan. Father Matthew, thank you so much for approving this opportunity for the youth group here. And we're so blessed with our pastor. We love him very much too.
Thank you so much.